The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. All you got to do, install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, lacrosse. Let's get this done. Get the OSG Sports app today.
What makes college football special? It's the rivalries and trophy games, from the Battle of the Bone to the Bronze Stalk. It's college football's rivalries and trophy games. Here's your host, the online sports guys.
Tommy Palmer thanks. John Wilkerson here. Later I'll be joined by Anthony Goldman, Phil Canner, and Jon Nelson. This week we discuss a great SEC series disturbed by conference realignment. It's been 8 years since Auburn and Florida met on the football field. They meet at the Swamp Saturday. Anthony Goldman and I discuss this great series. In the MAC, Ball State and Northern Illinois will play for the Bronze Stalk Trophy for the 12th time. Joel Godett, the voice of the Ball State Cardinals, and Kaleb Carter from the Dekalb Daily Chronicle join the show to discuss. And we'll talk Battle of the Piney Woods between Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston State. Jon Nelson has the voice of the Bearkats Rob Hipp, and Rob Myers, the voice of the Lumberjacks. John also goes Division II for the Coal Bowl between Indiana, Pennsylvania and California, Pennsylvania. They play for the Coal Miners Pail. Matthew Kifer, Sports Information Director at Cal PA, joins the show to discuss all things Coal Bowl.
And we welcome back Anthony Goldman to the College Football Rivalries and Trophy Game Show. It's been a while since you've been on this side.
Yeah, man. Sorry I missed you last week, but, me and Mickey had a lot of conversation, and Mickey has some concerns about the LSU secondary, just so you know.
There you go. We understand your young daughter is in tow, so we might get her opinion later in the show.
Yeah, she'll weigh in. She's an Alabama fan, too, by the way.
So while we were planning the rivalry and trophy game show, we reached out to some Florida Gators and some Auburn Tigers and never heard back. So Anthony and I are going to assess this rivalry between Auburn and Florida, which was a really good one, Anthony, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And I mean, they would play for championships, and it's hard to believe Auburn and Florida have not met in 8 years.
It really is. This is one of the sad misfortunes of the division realignment whenever Missouri and Texas A&M came in the conference, and you only got those limited rotational opponents from the other division. Auburn fans love the series, and Florida fans do as well, but there's been a lot of great moments, like you said, in this series. And, you go back to the 70s and 80s, it's funny because when we talk about this game, this feels almost like a spitting image of a 1994 Auburn-Florida matchup. From the quarterback names to the style of play, this feels like one of those 90s Auburn-Florida games. And the 90s had a lot of great moments. These two teams may not play a lot, John, but they've had a lot of classic games.
The one game I remember is 85 when Florida and Auburn met, and Bo Jackson was in the middle of his Heisman Trophy campaign, and he just gained 47 yards against a Gator defense, and Florida ended up winning 14-10 to kind of stop the momentum briefly of the Bo Jackson Heisman Trophy Express, and it was one of the that put Florida number one in the country at that time. So it was one of those games that it was memorable for me.
Well, and of course, Auburn fans in the 70s, they remember Sullivan to Beasley. Sullivan to Beasley was a big connection, in the year Pat Sullivan won the Heisman Trophy. Florida was a game that they had a lot of yards against that really helped Pat Sullivan. When I think of this series, though, and I think of the game that stands out, the game that jumps out to me is 1993. And that was Terry Bowden's first year at Auburn. Auburn was on probation after Pat Dye had left the program. And something that you'll never see again, John, they weren't allowed to play on television.
Right.
Could you imagine a team now getting banned from TV? It would never happen today. But because of that, Auburn and Florida were not allowed to play on TV. So I can remember, my stepfather and his family are all Auburn grads. And I can remember vividly, we went over to a bar. It was not an Applebee's, but it was a local place, kind of like a sports bar or Applebee's type of place. and they had a closed circuit feed of the Auburn-Florida game. It was from Auburn. There was no calls on it. It was just Nat sounds was all it was, and a wide static shot of the field. And they pumped in the Auburn radio call with Jim Fife over the speakers in the restaurant, and that was how we watched that game. And Auburn, they won the game. They upset Florida on that day. I'm trying to remember what Florida was ranked, because Florida was ranked very high at the time. I think they're number 4 in the country. But they beat them 38-35. And then the next year, they go to Gainesville and they won in the Swamp 36-33, which is a big catch by Frank Sanders in the last 40 seconds of the game. So those are really the two probably biggest moments I think of when I think of this series.
Well, when I think of the 94 game, I think of that one too, because I remember Auburn was 17-point underdogs to Florida. And I was living out west at the time, and I decided to put some money on Auburn to not only beat the spread, but win outright. And I had a nice little payday, let's say, on that one, because Auburn, again, with Frank Sanders' catch, Auburn wins at 36-33. And I had a little bit of a windfall, let's say. Go to more recent history. They met twice in the year 2000. And met in that championship game in which Auburn, Florida kind of dominated that series, winning it big both games. But the point is, these two teams, when they played, there was always something on the line.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned the 2000s. I mean, 2007 was a big upset when Auburn beat number 4 Florida at Jordan-Hare. They hit a big field goal. I believe the kicker's name, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm guessing. Wes Byram, I believe was his name. I will look this up. But Wes Byram hit like a 45-yard field goal at the end of the game. I think he missed it, if I'm recalling correctly. And there was like a timeout in the icing, and he got another chance. There you go, Wes Byram. How about that? Hits it. They called a timeout to ice him, and then he got another opportunity, and he hit it, and they won 20-17. So, yeah, there's been a lot of big moments, but I think this is another big game, and this is kind of like Alabama, Georgia, in two teams that are, border states, but they don't play that much. But when they play, it feels special. Yeah. And I know Auburn and Florida. Yeah, I know Auburn and Florida right now may not have the national cachet that Alabama and Georgia have, but to me, this game kind of has that feel to it.
Well, you mentioned the quarterbacks, Kyle Trask and Bo Nix, and it does have that feel of 1993, 1994. Heck, when Bo's dad was playing.
Can you name the quarterbacks from that 1994 game? Putting you on the spot.
Was it Shane Matthews for Florida?
It was not. That was 1993. 1994 was a Terry Dean started that game. Okay. Terry Dean threw 5 interceptions and was benched in the third quarter for a guy that you may have heard of. Some guy named Danny Warfel came in and never
the
looked
rest
back.
Is history.
And for Auburn, it was Patrick Nix.
Yeah, I was going to say Bo's dad.
Yeah, so you'll have a Nix heading down to the Swamp. And I would say Kyle Trask is probably more Terry Dean than Danny Warfel, but the good Terry Dean, not the 5 interception Terry Dean.
So does that mean Boobie Whitlow is Bo Jackson? That's a little bit of a stretch, right?
Maybe Stephen Davis.
Stephen Davis, even better. But, as we look into this game, Florida needs this would be a signature win for them if they could get it and really kind of give them a little momentum heading into the Georgia game when they play in the cocktail party. And then for Auburn, look, I'm impressed with Auburn. That defense is legit. Bo Nix adds that dimension, that it factor that's been missing. And the offensive line, that's something you and I talked about at the beginning of the season. That offensive line of Auburn, they're special. They're not bad.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head that nobody's talking about. The offensive line is what's maturing. We knew the defense was good, and everybody is losing their minds about what Auburn did last week against Mississippi State. And yes, Bo Nix looked very much more comfortable back there, made some really good throws. But this offense begins and ends with that offensive line. And the way those guards are pulling, the way that they're hitting their run fits, they are growing into this system and this season, and it's all seniors, John. They're only going to get better. And those gaps that they were leaving for Boobie Whitlow to run through, this is Gus Malzahn 101. That's why their offense is so successful. Now, I do think it's funny because you and I were a little bit higher on Auburn in preseason than a lot of people were, and now everybody's wanting to throw them into the playoff race.
Yeah,
I say let's hold our reins on that a little bit. Last week was a great offensive step, but that also had a little bit to do with Mississippi State's woes as well. They're not going to have that kind of offense, I don't believe, against Florida. Now, I do think that Auburn's a better team than Florida on both sides of the ball, but Florida's going to give them some problems. And Florida's a 3-point dog at home. They know this, and they're going to come ready to play, as you know, John.
You are right, and I can't wait to watch this game. It's appointment television for me. And we got much more rivalries to talk about. When we come back, we'll be talking about the Braun Stalk rivalry. We've got Joel Godett from Ball State, the voice of the Ball State Cardinals coming up, and as well we'll hear from the Northern Illinois Huskies. But before we do that, Anthony, when you're wanting to buy tickets to the Auburn-Florida game or maybe to the Braun Stalk Trophy game, where are you going to go on the internet?
I'm going to go to SeatGiant.com. And when I go to SeatGiant.com, I'm going to type in a promo code, John. What promo code am I going to type in?
You're going to type in SVH.
Why would I do that?
Because it helps you and it helps us. That's SeatGiant.com.
Saturday at Husky Stadium in DeKalb, Illinois, Ball State and Northern Illinois will meet for the 47th time. Since 2008, the Cardinals and the Huskies have competed for the Braun Stalk Trophy, created as a tribute to the rural areas surrounding each university's small town. Ball State won the first Braun Stalk Trophy in 08, 45-14, and since then, the trophy is yet to return to Muncie, Indiana. NIU has won the last 10 in a row. Kaleb Carter from the DeKalb Daily Chronicle joins me later, but first, let's hear from the Ball State side, and here's Phil Canner.
Joining me this afternoon is Joel Godett, the play-by-play guy for the Ball State University. Joel, thanks for joining the show, and tell us a little bit, what's the Braun Stalk?
Well, technically speaking, it's several stalks. It's a sculpture of several stalks of corn stuck on a base with the logos of both Ball State and Northern Illinois on it. They created the trophy back. It was instituted in the 2008 season as just kind of a rivalry between the two westernmost Mid-American Conference schools, and Western Michigan's kind of western, but Northern Illinois is the furthest west, and they've got Ball State, who just kind of is a little bit of a geographic outlier. The Cardinals have a traditional rivalry with Miami of Ohio as well, but this just established another rivalry a little more than 10 years ago, and since then it's pretty much been a Northern Illinois rivalry that's gone with them being the dominant team in the league. But the last couple of years, it's been close, and it's always been a fun one to play.
Absolutely, and you actually kind of answered my second question. But the Northern Illinois does lead the series 23-20, which indicates that at one point in time, this was a pretty close contest between the two schools.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's college football. There's ebbs and flows. I mean, Northern Illinois had a span of time in its history where it was, bad. They at one point had lost 23 consecutive games back in the late 90s, and Ball State went through a span of its own similar to that, and Northern Illinois obviously played in the Orange Bowl in the 2012 season, the 2013 Orange Bowl, and Ball State had that 12-0 undefeated regular season back in 2008. So both have kind of had their ebbs and flows, and it just so happens that the trophy was instituted at a time when Ball State won the inaugural one in its undefeated one in 2008, and then kind of had a downturn for a few years as NIU hit that national upswing. And then since then, it's become this big boogeyman because it's 10 in a row. But, they've been good games. I mean, two 8-point games or an 8 and a 7-point game in the last couple of years. They're always close late. 2013 was when Ball State was 9-1 and Northern Illinois was 9-0. It was a night game on ESPN2. The place was electric. I mean, I can vividly remember it. And it was a game Ball State may very well have won until Jordan Lynch got away from Jonathan Newsom, two guys that went on to make it into the NFL, and extended a drive that Northern Illinois scored on and wound up winning the game. So it's been close, even though it seems lopsided in the win-loss column.
What about the fan bases? I mean, how energized does the Ball State campus get when this game comes along?
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally and historically there is more, like the Miami-Ohio rivalry goes back further, and I think resonates probably more with alums. But it had kind of faded away for a long time, and the teams were split into different divisions. They didn't play every year. That one has come back now. It's become a recognized trophy game by the league the last week of the regular season every year. And I think, like, historically that one resonates a little bit more. But certainly, you know, this one is one that you circle with your Ball State every single year, just if only because of the fact that Northern Illinois has been, I mean, the top dog in the league. So it's always the game you circle, and it just so happens that there's a trophy that goes along with it. It makes it a little more interesting. And then on top of that, I mean, certainly Ball State recruits the Chicago area a little bit. So you get some guys that were recruited by both schools, and you know, Jacob White is, you know, Ball State's leading tackler and captain on defense. He won a Pee Wee championship at Husky Stadium, so he's from that area. He was on recruiting radars in that area, but he is here. So there's always a little bit of a chip on your shoulder when that happens as well.
How's the Cardinals season been going so far, and what are the expectations going in? Yeah,
I mean, they're 1-3, which, you know, it's tough, but they could really easily be 3-1. You know, they should have won against Florida Atlantic. You lose by 10 in a game. You had 4 turnovers and a blocked kick, including one turnover that was literally a fumble on the way into the end zone. So that's a dagger. North Carolina State not last week was a bye, but the week before that, I went to North Carolina State and had a punt return for a touchdown and a punt block returned to the 7, which immediately turned into a touchdown. And, you know, like, ifs and buts and all that stuff, but you know, they didn't give up a true defensive point to an ACC team for the entire second half of that game. So you look at all those things and say 1-3, sure, but I think there's a lot of hope about that. And you know, a team that started 1-3 has played for the Mid-American Conference Championship each of the last 2 years. So I see no reason that Ball State thinks it can't put itself in that situation. But obviously, it's got to win this weekend to beat the defending champion and put itself in the right direction.
How's the weather looking up there for the game this weekend?
I am the worst weather person ever. I wear sweaters when it's 85 and nothing when it rains. So I'm just going to say nice and hope I'm right.
Is this the type of thing, if the Cardinals are able to pull it off, could be a springboard to kind of a successful season and potentially maybe even squeeze it into a bowl game if they get on a run? Yeah,
well, I think they need it for a bowl game. I mean, just the math is not on your side at this point. You know, you start 1-3, the math's not on your side. Realistically, you've got to go 7-5 to guarantee a bowl spot. So your wiggle room really starts to go away if you don't win this one. But yeah, I mean, from a springboard standpoint, like, I mean, you know, to beat a man, you got to beat the man. And you know, Northern Illinois is the man. They are the defending Mid-American Conference champion. So if you start your conference season with a win over that team, obviously there's the mental component of knowing you just won that game, and there's, you know, the statistical fact of you're 1-0 and it gets you off on a good foot. But there's also certainly a tiebreaker in that. And, you know, the Mid-American Conference West is one of those divisions where it's come down to that several times since I've been here over the last 8 years. I remember one year there was a 3-way tie, and Northern Illinois just happened to, like, had beaten the right teams along the way tiebreakers work in this league, that they got into the MAC title game. So, you know, you beat the team that's the champion, that makes you feel good, but it also gives you a leg up in terms of if you get a muddled picture at the end of the season, certainly it gives you a statistical advantage if a whole bunch of teams finish 4-2 and you've got that kind of win under your belt.
God knows you can never beat a reference to Ric Flair. Joel, I think that's a great way to wrap things up here with this segment. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Phil. Jon Wilkerson back with you, joined by Kaleb Carter from the Dekalb Daily Chronicle. He's the beat writer for Northern Illinois. And this week, of course, the Huskies take on Ball State as they play for the Bronze Stalk Trophy. So, Kaleb, tell me how the Bronze Stalk came about.
So essentially, NIU does not have a history of rivalry games that are super meaningful in terms of trophy games. When current coach Thomas Hammock was playing for the school, he played there from about 99 to 2002. Really good running back at the time. They didn't actually have a trophy game. Toledo was actually considered the rival. So essentially, NIU needed a MAC rival. Ball State kind of fit the bill. It's not terribly far away, and they came up with this stock, and it's kind of funny. Sometimes when it comes to college football, trophies can be interesting between the Little Brown Jug and other random things that have come about with weird history. The stock is really something as simple as Muncie and Dekalb are both in relatively rural places. It just commodifies. It's like the embodiment of the Midwest with the trophy. So it's really about as simple as that. They just kind of came together and were like, we both want a rivalry, we both want a trophy game, and so that's how it came about.
So the first one was in 2008, and Ball State wins that one 45-14. And after that, it's been the Huskies after that. It's almost as if you need to retire the trophy in DeKalb, Illinois, right?
Yeah, and the senior class talking at the press conference from the Husky side this week were basically like, we refuse to be the senior class that loses this trophy. Two guys said the exact same thing where they said, it's an ugly trophy, but I'll be danged if I lose that trophy. It's not happening with our class. So it's been in DeKalb a long time. The 1 year Ball State won it, the first year of the trophy. Ball State was a top 25 team. Folks might remember that was kind of peak early MACtion where you saw a lot of high-scoring games, and that was when the conference was getting attention for being on ESPN and having these ridiculous games between NIU and Toledo and Akron and Toledo, and Ball State obviously being a big part of that with some explosive offenses. But yeah, it's really been one-sided. It's not that there haven't been some good games over the years, but even just 2 years ago, it was a 63-17 NIU victory. And just last year, more of a close game, but it's been one-sided. I'm sure Ball State is probably as hungry as ever to finally get this back on their side. They probably, after seeing NIU's non-conference performance, feel that they could, finally get that back.
With Ball State being the designated rival for NIU in the MAC, what's it like on campus this week as the students and the fans get ready for Ball State?
Well, around campus, I think you hear it. You hear the murmurs of Ball State, but you still don't get the sense that it's a huge rivalry game. It absolutely has that name and it has that significance with the team itself. People do want to beat Ball State. Maybe you might see a few signs beat Ball State, but it's not really quite what you would probably hype up with a lot of other rivalry games where you've got maybe rallies on campus and big speaking events of the band to hype everybody up or anything like that. That type of fanfare, as far as I've been able to tell, doesn't really exist with this rivalry game. But the pride seems to be more from the teams themselves, really making it a point of emphasis to win this game.
Well, when you've dominated it for 10 years, it's kind of, second nature that the Bronze Stalk's going to stay in DeKalb, Illinois. But let's look at Northern Illinois because this season the Huskies started off with a win over Illinois State, and then it's 3 straight road games against Power 5 schools. You go out to Salt Lake and take on Utah in the altitude, then you go to Lincoln, Nebraska, the Big Ten, and then you go to Vanderbilt in the SEC and really give Vanderbilt a really good competitive game. This is the first home game Northern Illinois has had. You're on the road the entire month of September. You start October and you're back home after 34, 35 days. That's got to be refreshing.
Yeah, and the players said as much too this week, where it's sure they love playing in these big stadiums and cool atmospheres, but they're all pretty happy to be back in DeKalb and playing a home game. Illinois State game isn't exactly how you script it if you're a Husky fan, but they still get a 2-touchdown win in that game. And since then, it's been nothing but going on to Utah, one of the nation's top defensive lines, They're not really able to run the ball with consistency in that game. And despite, some explosive plays against a very good Utah defense, they got completely shut down in the second half of that game. If you kind of just look at that, you look at the first half film and they're thinking, we're stoked about this. Second half film, they're like, we'd rather forget about this. Their only point as a teaching moment. They go to, they get Nebraska, and it's that game was rather interesting in that it still felt like it could have been a competitive game late in the first half when NIU's trailing by 3 scores, but they just never were able to convert. And they headed into that Nebraska game really expecting to be playing in a 1-possession game late. They obviously 2 years ago went into Lincoln and grabbed a win. It's considered one of the bigger wins in program history. So after that loss, it was a little bit debilitating. There were some lingering injuries heading out of the Utah game and Nebraska game. NIU's best linebackers out for the season. One of the starting linebackers, who was a senior, was lost before the season. There were some other guys banged up, bruised up, some defensive linemen on an already inexperienced defensive line on the ends. So they headed into this past game over in Vanderbilt, and I think the expectation was still, this is a team, this defense in Vanderbilt, that hadn't shown much in their losses, obviously, to Georgia and LSU, and they expected to go out and put some points on the board. So when they went into the halftime break, with having not scored despite having moved the ball, I think that worried a lot of fans. I think NIU did enough in the second half to be like, okay, non-conference is over. We still showed promise. They probably aren't sweating it a ton, but I mean, if NIU struggles to, perform well offensively in the first half of that Ball State game, I think you're going to have a lot of people sweating.
We're talking to Kaleb Carter from the Dekalb Daily Chronicle. He covers Northern Illinois University for the paper. So let's talk about how things are going at Northern Illinois, because Ross Bowers came in, won the starting job. We remember him from Cal a couple of years ago when he led Justin Wilcox's offense. He's really increased the passing attack for Northern Illinois since he got the starting job, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think more so than even bringing him in, with that idea in mind, was that and while they did go after him for him to throw the ball, Eric Eisness's offense, the offensive coordinator, folks, if they know anything about him, he was the offensive coordinator at South Dakota State for a long time, and they tend to have some success at that level. They do throw the ball around a lot. There's some very good NFL players, some decent NFL players from South Dakota State. That Godett comes to mind. But they did want to throw the ball around. Bowers was probably the pick to go. They went out, they got themselves a transfer quarterback because they knew they would like to throw the ball more. But in the past, NIU's identity in the last couple of years has been as a running team. Even the Jordan Lynch years, that's a team that ran the ball, even with the dual threat capabilities that he had. Husky fans are used to teams being able to run the ball. And for them to kind of go out, trot out, and throw the ball a ton on first down this year like they have is kind of a change-up. So I think they're still trying to find their offensive identity to a certain extent. The running game did get going a little bit against Vanderbilt. The offensive line did look a little bit more consistent, put together, a little bit better communication in the Vanderbilt game. Of course, you don't know how much of that's because Vanderbilt's unit defensively was not really near as good as Nebraska or Utah. But the identity is definitely more through the air oriented. And but I think you're still going to see NIU start to run the ball with better consistency and more production. I think that's going to start this week.
Okay, Kaleb, how would you describe the Bronze Stalk Trophy, and have you laid your hands on that trophy?
If I wanted to touch the trophy, I could have yesterday. This being our Tuesday press conference for NIU, it's kind of just like a, how do I describe this? It looks like it's like a chunk of wood. It looks like something you'd see in a trophy case from like the 1940s, from like when your high school basketball team won a city championship 12-10, and then it's got just a corn stalk. Yeah, just a corn stalk that's bronze, and it's about 2.5 feet high, maybe. It's just a skinny corn stalk. Look, maybe shaped proportionally similar to what you would expect of an actual corn stalk, and you can find a picture of it easily. It's very distinguishable as far as trophies go, because I don't think there are many trophies that are that, what's the word? Asymmetrical, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is kind of boxy on the bottom and kind of stalky, I guess is the best way to put it on the top. It looked like it'd be very bottom heavy and kind of difficult to carry around, especially with those little pointing stalks everywhere. That could be that could be a weapon almost as you're carrying it around.
I'm trying to warn a couple kids not to use it as a projectile because that thing's dangerous.
Kaleb, tell us what you're working on and how do you think things are going to go Saturday?
Oh, well, heading into this week, I've been working on some stuff concerning redshirt eligibility. This NIU team is, at least under Hammock so far, is very interesting about how they are going about redshirts. They're giving their freshmen a ton of time in really high leverage situations because this coaching staff is really high on evaluating young players very early and pressing them into situations of pressure and see how they perform under it. So I've written some stuff about that. You can find that if interested in the Dekalb Daily Chronicle website. And, written a little bit more this past week about NIU trying to correct mistakes, making the types of mistakes that offensively have put them behind the chains, that have led to second and third and long situations. So if anybody wants to read about that, there's plenty on the site about that right now. As far as this game week goes, it's typical week. You do the presser. I headed out to practice Tuesday, watched a little bit, saw what they had in store, and then, Saturday comes around, 2:30 game, and it's the first afternoon game they play at home this year, so it could have potentially be a good atmosphere. Weather's supposed to be mid-high 50s, so who knows? It could end up raining. Coach Thomas Hammock said that he hopes it's rainy and windy because Ball State throws the ball so much. I won't mind it too much if that's the case. I'm in the press box. I'll get over it. But just hoping for a competitive, fun game that, does justice to a rivalry game.
Well, Kaleb Carter from the Dekalb Daily Chronicle, we appreciate you joining us on college football's Rivalry and Trophy Games podcast. And have fun on Saturday.
For sure. Thank you guys for having me.
When we come back, we go Division II. Jon Nelson has the Coal Bowl between Indiana, Pennsylvania and California, Pennsylvania. That's next on college football's Rivalries and Trophy Game show on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Rock at the What's Up Falcons podcast, and I'm joined with my boys. My boys in the house. Where you at?
Yeah. What up?
Oh, gee, and we have Q, and we have Hoop in the house.
Q's here, the most beloved guy in all of sports entertainment.
Indeed. Hey, y'all, we want to thank everyone for listening to us, and if you want to listen to some great Falcons information, check us out on the What's Up Falcons podcast. Right, fellas?
Right. Sir. Hey, we here every week, baby.
We keeping it real, so check us out out there on Twitter. Holla. Peace.
Subscribe to the What's Up Falcons podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Listen to the What's Up Falcons podcast at whatsupfalcons.com.
Welcome back to the OSG on CFB. It's Trophy Games and Rivalries, and we could not let this week go by without catching up with the sports information director, guru, and grand exalted poobah, California University, Pennsylvania, for everything Vulcans, and catch up on the Coal Bowl. Matthew Kifer hanging out with us to discuss what's going on between Cal PA and Indiana PA. Matthew, thanks for hanging out.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. So a lot of folks here, this is their first exposure to this particular rivalry in the Coal Bowl and the trophy and all of that kind of stuff. First and foremost, let's talk about the trophy. What does it look like and where is it right now?
Well, it's a traveling trophy. It goes back and forth between the winner of the trophy gets to keep it for the 365 days, basically, between the contests. The trophy is basically almost like a coal pail trophy. It's sealed shut, but also on the exterior side of it is some gold medallions that indicate the year and the final score for each game. So it's starting to get to a point now where it's looping around a second time, which is nice to see. This is the 11th year of the actual Coal Bowl itself, so it's getting some more decoration on there. Cal actually leads the series, but it's one that travels back and forth. Whoever gets the wins the trophy gets bragging rights, and typically it sits either in a football office or in the locker room. And even sometimes you never know if the president's office may request to have it, just to sort of have that little notch in their belt when their visiting president might be coming to campus.
Yeah, I was going to say, where is it right this very second?
Well, right now, again, we are looking at it. I think our director of athletic operations is actually in his office because, again, there'll be a certain people traveling with it because coaches don't have to worry about taking it back and forth because it has to be obviously on the field post game for the presentation to the winning team. But right now, it sort of bounces back and forth, but it will be making its trip up to Indiana, no doubt, on Saturday.
Now, is it one of those things kind of like the Stanley Cup? And I guess this is my standard question that I ask when we're talking about trophies of this when it comes to college football. Is it something where everybody can touch it, or is it Stanley Cup where only players and personnel touch it? What's protocol for handling the trophy?
Basically, anybody can touch it. It's one of those things that after the game, every player wants to grab it, and going to the locker room trying to figure out what player had it. Normally, it ends up somehow by a freshman that maybe not have played in the game. I think it's just because it gets set down for a second when the guys go jump around and everything like that. But it's not uncommon for an SID to perhaps go in there, an athletic director perhaps to go in and grab it just to make sure it doesn't get walked off into a dorm room or a campus house for the night, because we obviously want to make sure it's somewhere secure, and it actually is sealed shut. So it's one of those things where we don't want to get it and then have to figure out, well, why did this thing get unstuck and how do we get it sealed back again? So that way the lid always stays on for it when everybody starts jumping on after the end of the game.
Right, and that was kind of why I asked, because I know that we always know this, the legend of the Stanley Cup stories where it ends up in the bottom of a river, thrown off a bridge, or in a swimming pool, or that kind of thing, and that's why I like to ask about who can handle it, who can touch it, and where it sits, just for security purposes and for display purposes. That's why that question usually is asked when I'm doing these interviews for the show.
Yeah, certainly understood there. I mean, it's a nice piece in our football office, along with some other regional trophies, conference trophies, All-American, things like that. It's nice to showcase the recruits, but this time of year, it's not about the recruiting time. It's about trying to retain that trophy, which has been quite difficult to do because the home teams have been winning year in and year out lately.
I was going to ask, what is the rivalry like on the field for those that don't get to see Cal and Indiana go at it? What is the rivalry like? Can you break that down?
Yeah, the two schools are about an hour and a half apart. And they're both within the division of our conference, the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference. So every year these two teams meet. IUP has been dominated the series for multiple decades until probably mid-2000s, and Cal sort of had a resurgence on its football side, and it's been a good rivalry ever since. A lot of the same players. It's Cal, IUP, and another school in our conference. It's down to those three. For most of the recruits, those are the big three schools. So it's people on both sides. They played high school together. They grew up with each other. Maybe they played on rival high school teams. For instance, last year, the starting quarterback for IUP was a standout in high school and even in college. But one of his best friends in high school was our starting linebacker, and he was the spy on him the whole game. So basically, wherever he went, the quarterback went, our linebacker went. And definitely you can see some jawing back and forth. Again, somebody you grew up with, played with the whole time. It's pretty exciting. You know what they're going to do. They know what you're going to do.
A part of the rivalry, what are football Saturdays like for Cal, and what makes them so special in your mind?
I think it's one of those things. This one stands out every year. The idea of Cal and IUP definitely gets circled for everybody on the with the programs. Our coach is an alum of our program, and the head coach of IUP has been there for 20 plus years as an assistant, and now he's the head coach. So these coaches definitely know what it means. They ingrain it into the players. This Saturday at IUP, it's going to be their homecoming, so they're going to have a jam-packed place. I think they're also looking at maybe having a concert along the way. So, and Indiana is a pretty big, one of our bigger cities in our conference. So, come Saturday, I don't expect many of the 5,000 seats to be very empty at that stadium unless everybody just standing watching the game.
What's the season been like for the Vulcans so far?
Started off 3-1. We had a nice win to open conference play last weekend, and we actually we lost week 2, but came back and got a victory in week 3. Put up 58 points in the week 3 win, so it was riding high there. And a little bit more of a defensive battle week 4, but it's been a solid start to conference. Our coach always talks about going 1-0 every single week, and that's what they're looking at doing this week. They don't really look too far down the road. Cal actually had a consensus All-American last year, and he's back in the secondary. Lamont McFadder, he's one of the best in the country at the safety position. I have a sophomore quarterback who was Rookie of the Year in the conference, so I definitely can see the growth from him from year 1 to year 2, and 2 really veteran wide receivers and a veteran running back. There's a lot of different options there, and the defense has been one of the best in the country. Believe it or not, they're actually only allowing 20 yards of rushing per game. So the defense has been really clamping down, which IUP traditionally is a very good run offense, so it'll be a good test there.
Matthew Kifer, Sports Information Director for Cal PA, hanging out with us here to break down the Coal Bowl here on the OSG on CFB Trophy Games and Rivalries. And for those that haven't had the chance to see things in the PSAC, you mentioned that it's kind of like a 3-team race traditionally, but what's the football like for those who've never had the chance to sit down and watch it on a Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference is a 2-division format, East and West. About 8 teams on each side, 3 primary powerhouses in the West. And the East has been Westchester, which is right outside of Philadelphia. They've been dominant the last 3 or 4 years, but in my time with the university here, Bloomsburg's had some runs at it, Shippensburg's had some runs, and even Kutztown. So the East is a little bit more wide open, but definitely in the West it is a 3 powerhouse school. And just like how, again, with the recruiting in the West being IUP, Slippery Rock, and Cal U, the East is dominated a lot by those same schools. The conference actually expanded this year, added Shepherd out of West Virginia. They made the national championship game a couple years ago, so it's another powerhouse for them to be looking at. They even making that division even stronger. The top team from each division ends up playing the last week of the regular season, a championship game. So it always means a lot, and bragging rights there, trying to find a way to get in the NCAA playoffs. Since there is no automatic qualifier in football, it's a very big deal. You want to make sure you win that game and make a statement to the NCAA selection committee to try to get in as high of a seed as you possibly can. And the PSAC has done a great job over the years of having multiple teams in the NCAA playoffs and making runs not only second or third round, but even semifinals and championship games in football.
Time for the blatant promo, and this is how we like to finish up the segment. For anybody who wants to peek in on this game and on California PA athletics in general on a Saturday afternoon, how do they do it this Saturday, and how do they do it after this Saturday to keep tracks on the Vulcans this season?
Yeah, year-round, our official school website, calvulcans.com, has all the links to video, audio, and stats throughout for not only football, but all season long, all sports. And our campus television production has a YouTube feed. They actually cover all of our games, home and away. So you can always find the action of Cal football online through the calvulcans.com schedule page for football. You can check it out there. They also cover all of our basketball games. Our TV production does a great job, one of the best in the conference, one of the best at this level in terms of coverage, home and away. They've gone through lightning, they've gone through rain, they've gone through about everything over the years, and they do a great job, and we're happy to have them. But calvulcans.com is the best way to find anything. Cal U Athletics, and also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That's the same handle for all those accounts.
Matthew Kifer, Sports Information Director for the Cal Vulcans, breaking down the Coal Bowl for us. Matthew, thanks for hanging out with us and breaking it down. Have a fantastic game this weekend. We will be following along, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
When we come back, the OSG on CFB continues. More trophy games and rivalries just around the corner. We'll be back in 2 and 2.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
Welcome back to the OSG on CFB, trophy games and rivalries. And what we like to do is just kind of canvas all around. And when the executive producer of the show, Jon Wilkerson, hands the sheet out at the beginning of the weekend, and he sits there and says, okay, here's what's going on here in FBS and FCS and Division II and NAIA, I sit there and I always drift to the bottom of the page because that for me is the fun part. So this week, Battle of the Piney Woods, Sam Houston State and Stephen F. Austin, and it's going to be held at NRG Stadium in Houston. And if I remember my ad correctly, Rob, tickets start at $15 just to get in the door.
Yeah, $15. Nobody can beat that. They've made it easy for everyone to come out and enjoy that game, especially all the friends down in Southeast Texas, John.
And that is Rob Hipp, play-by-play voice of Sam Houston State, hanging out with us here for one half of the explanation of the Piney Woods, and it's Bearkats with a K, everybody. It is Bearcat with a K football. First off, what has study hall been like for you this week getting ready for this one?
Well, John, you talk about a rivalry that goes back to, we're talking 94 games now. And this is a rivalry that dates back to 1923. Really wasn't officially called the Battle of the Piney Woods from my research until 1925. That is a lot of history, a lot of years. You can imagine I've been pouring through a lot of documentation. I've been calling some down in the Sam Houston State area down there in Huntsville. And, you know, for me, it's my first year, so I'm learning a lot. I've been really blessed with the opportunity to work with Sam Houston State University. And this rivalry, it's unbelievable to hear the history, a lot of what's happened and transpired over the years. It's incredible. And as you guys know, you cover so many rivalries and so many awesome things on college football. This is another great one, the third longest running rivalry in the state of Texas.
Third longest in the state of Texas, huh?
It is third longest from what I've found. Now, if that information's wrong, you know, I'll have to go back and double check the facts. But that's what I found, at least here in the FCS as well.
And that's the cool part about college football is that when you sit there and you stumble across info and you go, man, this one's been going on for a really long time. Let me ask you this: from all of your research, and I know that there's probably a top 5 list that we could come up in here somewhere, but off the top of your head, what are some of the coolest things that you have discovered about the rivalry in all of these years?
Well, again, it goes back so many years, and I'm still digging through information even before we got on the phone and started talking earlier, because there is so much. You know, some of your guests have rivalries that go back to 1998. Since 2007, you know, the winner of this has been earned a 21-pound solid cedar trophy that displays replica pistols from the Texas Frontier Pass. So,
oh, wow.
Unlike some of the rivalries that have had these amazing trophies that have went on for a while, the Battle of the Piney Woods has had one, but it started in 2007 with a new 21-pound solid cedar trophy. So I thought that was some pretty cool research. You go back and look, though, before that, and there was actually some pistols that were given away. And I wanted to chat with you about this because I was going back and looking at this, and I'll go back and answer some of your questions on the games here in just a little bit.
Oh, sure.
But as far as the trophy, as I said earlier, since 2007, the winner of the Battle of the Piney Woods has earned this 21-pound solid cedar trophy. 21 pounds of cedar, that's a lot.
I know.
With these replica pistols attached to a tombstone and logos of both the universities engraved on them. But prior to this, John, a pair of Colt Walker pistols, that was the original prize awarded to the winning team. So back in the day, they were handing out pistols. This started back in 1976 whenever they played at the Astrodome. Here's the fun fact. These pistols were lost over time. They've never been recovered. So if someone out there listening has or knows where they are, kindly return them. Don't put them up on eBay. Let's give them back.
Yes. And that, the first thing that runs through your head, okay, did those Colt Walkers still actually function at the time they were handed out every single year? And, were they fired ceremoniously, kind of like up in the air after? I mean, so many things run through your mind, but you mentioned 21 pounds of cedar. I mean, you do 3 sets of 12 with that, and you've done your buys and tries for the couple of days.
That's right, man. Well, this history, 56, 35, and 2. There was 2 ties if you go back between these 2 teams. The Bearkats have won 8 straight of these. One of those standout games, of course, this will be the 10th year at NRG in Houston, but back in 2016, it was a record-setting crowd, John, at 27,411 fans at NRG. It was a 63-28 Sam Houston State victory. Man, you could just go through and throw a dart and pick any of these games. It's a lot of fun to watch. Man, the cliche about high school football in the state of Texas, and then it transitions over into college. This is one of those games that if you are a fan of football, period, it's one that you need to witness. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And you mentioned the trophy and the rivalry and all this kind of stuff. For those who are drifting into Piney Woods for the first time, you and I know what it's like. We talk about what it means on Friday night, what it means on Saturday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday night for college. But for you who are now a part of Sam Houston State, what's it like for people who wrap themselves around Bearcat football? Can you describe that vibe for me?
The one that I'll say, and of course any team, John, could say this, but the one that I've noticed right away, very passionate fans. And passionate fans that are accustomed to winning. And as a huge San Antonio Spurs fan in the NBA, when we don't lose or when we don't win, I'm not happy. Yeah. So you can think about a Sam Houston State team really kind of been the prize in the gem of the Southland over the past decade, besides last year, of course, not making the playoffs. But before that, you've got a good 9-10 year history to where the Bearcats are constantly winning, and even going back before that. And so this is a community that, number one, is passionate. But when their team doesn't win and when they don't play well, they pick apart every play as they should. And so right now, of course, 2-0 in conference play, finding a little bit of rhythm. The community is a lot better off now that we're starting to get those victories. But this is a team that's accustomed to winning. So passionate is the first thing that I would say. Secondly, it's a community that really understands and knows their team. You know, you've got big college cities, of course, over in the FBS like Austin, Texas, and you talk about other teams in the Big 12, such as Texas A&M, but then you think of Huntsville, Texas, and some folks say, well, Huntsville, where is that? Well, if you know college football, you know where Huntsville is because you know of Sam Houston State University. John, this is a college that has grown in attendance as well. This isn't, you know, a small college. We're talking 23,000 students, and it continues to grow and expand. And I grew up in Georgetown, Texas, which, if you're familiar with a little bit of geography, Georgetown, one of the fastest growing communities in the nation north of Austin, Texas. Yep. We have about 75,000 or so folks. You go over to Huntsville, population around 60,000. So it's a town that I'm familiar with as far as the population goes. But you talk about everybody in town, of course a college town, but everybody, you see Bearcat orange everywhere. And since I started, John, Ben, you know, in Austin, they bleed orange. I say in Sam Houston, we're bleeding the right color of orange.
There you go. Because I know that a lot of folks in the OSG remember Kennesaw State and Sam Houston going at it a couple of years ago for postseason. So they know the pedigree of Sam Houston State. Being a Spurs fan, I'll go ahead and pull that analogy from you. Rob Hipp, the voice of Sam Houston State, hanging out with us here on the OSG on CFB. So who are the David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili of the Bearcats this year that folks need to keep an eye on?
Well, one of them, and I'm glad you asked, John, because one of them, for those that follow Sam Houston, early on in the season, it was a battle of the sophomore quarterbacks between Eric Schmid and Ty Brock. And through the first 4 games of the season, we saw that back and forth action because really both quarterbacks were playing well. And so Coach Keeler, during our interviews and, of course, interviewing with other press, he said, we're still trying to find the rhythm, but both of these quarterbacks have been great. But then after the loss up at North Dakota, there was really a change to say, okay, we've got to really find some consistency now. And so versus UIW, they go with Eric Schmid, University of Incarnate Word, the Bear Schmid at home at Bowers in Huntsville. Schmid goes crazy, over 500 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. He earns the Southland Conference Offensive Player of the Week award. And then you fast forward to last week, and unfortunately on the road at McNeese, and I can talk about this because it's already been disclosed today, but Eric Schmid breaks his hand, and we don't know how long he's going to be out. And that's tough because you had a young man that just had started to find his spark. He was playing well, and that happened, if memory recalls, within the first drive last week. And kind of going back to last week, it was really weird. And going back to those passionate fans here in Huntsville, we go, John, in the first drive, there's no rain in the forecast that we can tell. As soon as Sam Houston gets the ball for the first drive, what happens?
Yeah.
Big cloud of rain comes, and it's not just a little sprinkle. It literally pours down the entire drive. And we won't go into that game, of course, because we're talking about what's coming up here this Saturday. But long story short, they end up putting the ball on the ground 6 times. They lost one of those, but mainly because of that first drive. Right after their drive is over, lo and behold, the skies open up, the sun comes out, and things are shining bright.
So wait a second, was there a weather machine that was involved from the opposition here? What was going on?
Man, I have no idea. I thought someone was playing a harp, you know, when that sun came out and the rain stopped when McNeese came. I said, man, this is really hometown advantage right here, home field advantage.
All right, so then looking at this week, knowing what's going to be going on long-term here in the conference and battling in the Southland, and you have a rivalry game staring you in the face, what are you looking at now when it comes to the position?
Well, Ty Brock has played in this situation before, John. The last time that the Cats faced Stephen F. Austin, Ty Brock rushed. He threw and received a touchdown. talking 3 for 3. That was the win over the Jacks last time. He became the first Bearcat to accomplish this in a single game. So you have a quarterback that, even though he didn't get the start versus UIW, Eric Schmid was the guy that they decided to go with. Eric Schmid breaks his hand last week. Ty Brock in. You're really setting up a scenario to where a quarterback that already has experience, he's in there. I think it's something that's very important where you're not just pulling a second or a third string guy even, but this is a guy who has already seen playing time this season. He knows the team. He knows the game. He knows this rivalry as, again, he played last year. So I think looking into it, you've got to be pretty happy. You're not happy that Eric Schmid is out with the broken hand, but you can feel confident and be happy in the fact that, hey, your other guy, Ty Brock, he's ready to go. He's played this season. He's played in this rivalry before.
21 pounds of Cedar Trophy, Colt Walkers having been involved in the whole thing. It's the Battle of the Piney Woods coming up this weekend. All right, Rob, time for the blatant promo. For those that want to listen, not just this week to the Battle of the Piney Woods, but to everything else going on at Sam Houston, how do they do it on a weekly and a daily basis?
Well, of course, we'll have the coverage right back on the legendary radio station in Huntsville, KSAM 101.7 FM, 101.7 FM. Hey, man, that's where Dan Rather got his start.
Nice.
So, it's legendary when you got a guy like Dan Rather getting started. But again, KSAM 101.7, that's KSAM101.7.com. You can also download the KSAM app on your phone, either Android or Apple. And that's the best way to kind of tune in and join what we're doing. The game will be televised, of course, but we'll have it on the radio call.
Well, as always, Rob, thanks for pulling back the curtain a little bit and letting us see the perspective from Sam Houston State on the Battle of the Piney Woods and reintroducing Bearcat football to everybody that aren't just fans of FCS, but fans of college football in general. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the OSG on CFB.
Yeah, you bet, John. And, hey, John, I've got some keys to victory in this game. Could I mention those as well? Could you ask me that question?
Go for it.
So I've just got a couple of things here. Talking about this series and where Sam Houston has been this year, keys to victory, always a cliche thing for the most part, right, John?
Yes.
You hear kind of the same thing over and over. But on the defense, this is a Sam Houston State team that has to continue their dominance. They lead the nation in the FCS in third down percentage on conversions, holding their opponents 17 of 80. That's just a little over 20% success. That's not too bad for the defense. On the offensive side of things, they rank 7th in the nation in passing, averaging just over 326 yards a game. The really big key in this ball game is they have to find Nathan Stewart, in my opinion, on the offense. This is a kid now that is the all-time career-leading receiver in the Southland with well over 4,000 yards. They've got to do that on the offense. They've got to convert third downs where they're only 32% this season. Of course, we talked about Eric Schmid out with the broken hand, so Ty Brock has the reins. He's got to find the rhythm. And then, of course, the cliche one, you got to protect the ball and limit the turnovers. The reason that I brought this up, though, is because of that rain last week causing some issues. 6 drops. They lost one of them. But on the season, 16 times they have dropped the ball. They've lost 6 of those. So, we're expecting over 27,000 in attendance. Possibly 2016 was the record that was set. The lower bowl at NRG is filled. In the 10th year, it is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
And we are looking forward to hearing what's going on. And we need a full report if whether or not those who do not participate in the game itself can actually lift said Cedar Trophy, much like the Stanley Cup, or since you didn't participate, if you're allowed to touch it. So that's the report that we need in talking about protocols and lifting a 21-pound Cedar Trophy. Rob, as always, thanks for all the info, all the intel, and putting up with all the questions having to do with everything here. Have a good call this weekend. Have a great rivalry game. We'll catch up with you on the flip side.
John, appreciate you. You guys keep up the great work as well. I really enjoy listening to your podcast.
And now the other half of the equation with the Battle of the Piney Woods, Sam Houston State and Stephen F. Austin. Now hanging out with us, it's Rob Myers, the voice of Stephen F. Austin. Rob, thanks for hanging out with us on the Trophy Game Show.
Sure, John. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so it is the 94th renewal. What has study hall been like for you this week?
It has been it's been a little bit different. We've got a new head coach, first-year head coach Colby Carthel, and he's embraced the rivalry between Sam Houston and SFA, and he's kind of poking the bear a little bit this week with social media with Sam Houston, and it has kind of gotten things riled up a little bit. And we're coming off a win over Lamar this last week, our first win of the year, so obviously folks are a little bit more optimistic and hoping that carries over, but it has been, there's always a sense of excitement during Sam week.
And I know that with Coach Carthel, he came in from Texas A&M Commerce, if memory serves, and doing really well with them at D2. So he understands it, at the very least. He understands rivalries. He understands how vital they are to communities and to teams in general. So, I mean, and to what football means to the state of Texas. So there's even if he's not necessarily up to date on Piney Woods, he understands the idea of rivalries and what it means and going up against the other guy.
Yeah, and I think everybody, really, across the country. I mean, everybody's got a rival, and certainly, Sam Houston is one of ours. It seems like we've got several throughout the course of the year, and sometimes you hear from other people that you're playing that they consider their game with you being a rivalry game when you may not consider it as such. And but this certainly has been for a long, long time. Unfortunately, Sam's kind of dominated things in recent memory, and we're just trying to figure out a way to kind of reverse that. But it is he has, as I mentioned earlier, he really has kind of embraced this week, and he knows where we are. He knows that he's got a big mountain to climb in turning this program around, but he enjoys the challenge of it and enjoys, the fun that's generated by stirring the pot, so to speak.
And I've heard that this is a 21-pound cedar trophy.
Yeah, there is a trophy. In fact, what was it? This will be the 10th year that we've played at NRG Stadium where the Texans play. Prior to that, in the other 90 or 84 meetings, I guess we'd only played at a neutral site once. But whenever we went to Houston, they developed a little trophy that probably in today's times they probably wouldn't have built. It's got a couple of revolvers on it, but yeah, it's presented to the winner. We won the first one, and Sam's won the last 9. So. We're just trying to get back on the winning side of things.
And then I've also heard that before that Cedar Trophy, there were actual Colt walkers that were involved too.
Possibly before my time. That on that trophy, there's two 45s, I guess, or whatever. But if there were actual Colts involved, then before my time.
But when it comes to FCS football. I know that, a lot of folks, we've talked about knowing their team, knowing their rivals and things like that, but they may not necessarily have had the opportunity to see and understand what football means to the Stephen F. Austin community. In your time there, and we know what football means to Texas, but what does football and athletics mean to the SFA community from your time there?
It means a lot. Obviously, when things are going well, and we had a right before Sam kind of went on the run that they've been on, that's been lengthy now, the last 8 or 9 years. The 2 to 3 years prior to that, we had a run where we won 10 games a year. Had a Walter Payton Award winner and Jeremy Moses, and we're winning a lot of football games. And as folks that have been on college campuses know, you can be successful in all of your sports, but when football is successful, everybody seems happier on campus, and it means a lot. Being in a small town in East Texas, football kind of permeates things here in the fall. And while soccer has been extremely successful here, and our track and field programs are perennial champions, volleyball in the NCAA tournament last year, and they've only lost once to this point. When football gets going again, everybody's better.
What's it like to play at NRG?
It's neat. I mean, I think as I said, this will be the 10th year that we've been down there, and just being a staff person and doing the games, it's fun to do a game in an NFL stadium and to be in that environment. If we play the game at home, whether we play at our place or in Huntsville, we'll have on a good afternoon, 10, 12,000 fans in attendance. But when we play at NRG, we're going to have 28 to 30,000 there. And so the environment's that much more charged. And I know that the student athletes enjoy it. Coaches, I think, get a kick out of it as well. It's great for our alumni bases because both schools, we're about 120 miles from Houston. Sam Houston's probably about 60 miles from Houston. So we have huge alumni bases in that area. So all the alums get to come out. So it's neat, and it's fun to be able to play in that sort of venue.
Rob Myers, play-by-play voice of Stephen F. Austin, breaking down the Battle of the Piney Woods from the Lumberjacks' perspective here on the OSG on CFB. For those who haven't had the chance to see SFA play football this year, who are some of the names when folks drop in and watch or listen to this game this weekend? Who are some of the names that folks need to pay attention to?
Well, that is the million-dollar question because to this point it has been a revolving door really in a number of positions. I mean, I know that last week at Lamar, 53 players hit the field last Saturday against Lamar, and 26 of them were freshmen. And it has just been changing for various reasons. But the guys that have kind of stood out to this point offensively, DeLeon Ward, who's a transfer from Texas Tech at running back, he's kind of taken over as the featured back, but we will still play three backs. But Ward has become the guy back there. Of course, Trey Self, who's a sophomore transfer quarterback from Butler Community College, he's kind of entrenched himself in the starting quarterback's job to this point, and is having a good year. He's taking real good care of the football and is making some good decisions, and is somewhat of a dual threat type guy at quarterback, and he's added a little bit to that position. So those two names offensively, I think that a couple of other guys, Remy Simmons in the slot, and Xavier Gibson, who's another freshman from Dallas, a wide receiver. He's our leading receiver right now. Xavier's had a great year. You'll hear his name obviously catching the football and also in the return game if he gets a chance to return one, and because he's electric back there as well. But on the offensive side of the ball, those are the names to look for. Defensive side of the ball, Quinn Jones, who's been a middle linebacker, has played well, and both of our safeties. And I'm not sure, how great it is when your safeties are your leading tacklers, but Trent Gordon is right now playing just about as well as anybody on the defensive side of the ball, leading us in tackles and from one of the safety spots back there. So those are the names you'll hear quite a bit on the defensive side of the ball. Up front defensively, literally, we took 9 defensive linemen to Lamar last week.
Oh, wow.
9 were freshmen, and 3 of them were walk-ons. So that's where it is right now up front.
With a team so young and with a first-year coach and all that kind of stuff, coming into the season, what were the expectations for Stephen F. Austin this season on the field? What were the expectations going in?
I don't know if Colby and his staff kind of put a numeric number on it. Hey, this is kind of where we need to. This is what we'd like to see. And the way he's approached is we just want to get better each week. And I think we have, the game against Baylor, you're just outmanned in that one. But we've had a couple of good drives, made them punt a few times defensively in the second half. And it didn't embarrass yourself. Then the next week, against a really good Tarleton State team that made a little news earlier this week that they're going to move to Division I and play as an FCS independent starting in next season. But Tarleton comes in here and we have a chance to beat them with 8 minutes to go and don't make plays, and they end up stealing one here in Nacogdoches. And then the next 2 weeks, same sort of thing. Go to overtime with Southern Utah on the road, and then couldn't quite get it done. But finally, after putting yourself in those positions, finally pull one out last week on the road against Lamar. So, they have gotten better each week. They knew coming in that, as I said, it was a deep hole to fill. I mean, we needed to. It's going to take a couple of years to kind of turn things around, but with so many freshmen playing right away, perhaps the turnaround will be just a little bit quicker.
Because I know that by the time you get to, say, Southeastern Louisiana, UIW, Central Arkansas, you're looking for those freshmen to be playing like sophomores to be playing like juniors.
Exactly. I mean, they're gaining, there's good and bad in it. The bad is that you're playing freshmen. The good is that they're gaining some great experience, and next year when they play, they will have some experience to rely on and hopefully won't make those same mistakes that they've made over the course of the first 5 weeks.
All right, time to wrap things up, and it's time for the blatant promo for those that want to give a listen and take a peek and see what's going on from the Stephen F. Austin perspective. How do they do it, not just this week with a rivalry game, but for everything going on that you get to put a headset on and call on a daily/weekly basis?
Yeah, we all of our games are streamed through our flagship station, which is Q1077fm.com or Q1077.com. They stream all of our games there. Obviously, we're a Learfield school, so everything is streamed on the TuneIn app as well, so you can hear all of that. At home, we simulcast our audio on the ESPN Plus broadcasts. All our games are streamed over ESPN Plus, all of our home events, so hear it all there as well, good or bad. And so those two streams are always available.
Well, Rob, as always, thanks for pulling back the curtain. Thanks for giving us the education from the Stephen F. Austin perspective on a rivalry game and a big rivalry there, not just in FCS but in college football. Thanks for taking the time and giving the folks the 411 for the OSG on CFB.
You bet. Appreciate it. Thank you.
When we come back, it'll continue. We'll have more rivalries and trophy games just around the corner. It is Twittered Anthony and Wilkie when we come back. We'll be back in 2 and 2. You're listening to the OSG on CFB on the OSG Sports Radio Network.
The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Get the OSG Sports app today. Anthony Goldman rejoins me as we wrap up the rivalry and trophy game show in college football. One thing we didn't do at the top of the show, we didn't pick between Auburn and Florida. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with Auburn in this game. I think that the key for Auburn is, the running game. We know how well it's doing, but they're hitting the deep ball. And the fact that they can now stretch the defense, I think is the difference, and Florida can't run. So I'm going to go 24-17 Auburn.
I'm going to go 27-21 Auburn. I like Auburn. I think right now Auburn is just playing really good football and doing all the right things. Bronze Stalk Trophy, Ball State, Northern Illinois. Who do you like?
Ooh, this is a good one, too. I actually have some NIU alum in my family. I wish I could say that they're excited about this game, but I'll be excited for them. I'm going to go NIU in this game. I like NIU's offensive line, and I think they may push Ball State around. They're a little undersized up front.
I'm going to go with the Huskies as well. They'll get their 11th Bronze Stalk in a row. Might as well retire the trophy to DeKalb, Illinois. So we have part one of the Commander-in-Chief Award, Air Force and Navy in Annapolis. I think this is going to be a fun football game to watch. Two teams, very similar skill set, like the triple option, very physical defenses as well. But I tend to like Air Force in this one, in this game, probably by a field goal.
Yeah, this is going to be a close game. Like you said, there's two option teams playing one another, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I like Air Force in this game. I think that Air Force showed against Colorado that they can stop the big play. Navy right now, they're running the triple option well, but they're scoring a lot on big plays. And I think that Air Force will be able to limit the big plays and make Navy drive. I like them in this game, and even though they're on the road, I actually like them by more than a touchdown.
Impressive. All right,
my daughter agreed, by the way, if you heard that.
Well, she wants to be daddy at something. FCS level, Battle of the Piney Woods. We heard from both Rob Hipp and Rob Myers, the play-by-play voices for Sam Houston State and Stephen F. Austin. And this game at NRG Stadium. And I can't remember the last time Sam Houston State wasn't ranked, but I do like the Bearkats in this one.
Yeah, Sam Houston State's had a really interesting year, haven't they? I mean, they've been very up and down, but I'll tell you what, though, their offense is scoring a lot of points right now. And I think that they score all over Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin, I actually have watched them play a game this year, believe it or not. Yeah. And in the game that I watched them play, they did not look very good, and they couldn't tackle anybody. So I'm going to go with Sam Houston State in this game.
And I wonder what the crowd's going to be like at NRG Stadium, because it's $15 tickets. And, hey, why not watch a good football team between a couple of Texas schools, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's going to be a lot of local high school prospects that are playing in this game, that played in that area.
Constitution State rivalry, Central Connecticut State and Sacred Heart. I'm just going to roll the dice and say go with Sacred Heart because they're at home.
I'm going to go with Sacred Heart because I've never heard of the other school.
And we got the Military Classic of the South, the Silver Shenko Trophy between VMI and the Citadel.
The Citadel. Even though, they beat Georgia Tech and everybody was watching them for that. The Citadel, though, they're not had that great of a year. Everyone talks about the Georgia Tech win, but they haven't looked great in this game. I actually like VMI. I think it's an upset, but I'm going to go VMI in this game.
I'm going to go VMI too, because you're right. Citadel, minus the loss or the win over Georgia Tech, they've been okay. Division II, we heard from Pennsylvania, as they take on Indiana, Pennsylvania in the Coal Miners Pail Trophy. Two really good Division II programs. I'm going to go with IUP.
Yeah, I'm going to go with IUP as well. I think that they're the much stronger program.
Division III, we got the little brass bell between North Central and Wheaton, Illinois. Have not seen them, have not read up on them. So I'm going to ignore that one for the pick.
Come on, Wheaton all the way.
I'm going Wheaton. All right, we'll go Wheaton. They're at home. And now we go to the NAIA level, Anthony, for the Franciscan Bowl between St. Francis and Marion, a couple of Indiana schools. And these are two teams that are powerhouses in the NAIA. This is a rivalry started by Sister M. Elise Chris and Marion President Daniel J. Elsner to recognize the two Catholic institutions or two universities of Franciscan tradition. And so they call it the Franciscan Bowl. And I'm going to go St. Francis.
I'm going St. Francis in this game as well. St. Francis last year was going for their third straight national championship. And they came up a little short. They went 10-3 last year, but they got knocked out in the semifinal. I think that they can make it 3 or 4 this year. I think not only do they win this game, I think they may have a natty by the end of the season.
There you go, at the NAIA level. So this will be a fun game to watch. So, Anthony, we're playing for a bronze Stalk. We're playing for the Piney Woods Trophy. We're playing for the Military Classic of the South, the Coal Bowl, Little Brass Bell, Franciscan Bowl. Great variety of trophy games this week.
Absolutely. I still think the Auburn-Florida game needs something. I was trying to think about it during the break while you were talking, and I was thinking, what if we did something similar to a jug, maybe like we can't say moonshine in college anymore because, politically correctness, but some type of drinking jug and make it like blue and orange, and I have the different colors of blue and orange with scores, something like that. Maybe the Die Spurrier Trophy, something like that.
I like that. I like the Die Spurrier Trophy and have them out there in the 50 awarding it.
You think people would love to say Die Spurrier all the time? So, yeah. There could be something there. You just got that, I can see.
I like that. The Die Spurrier Trophy. We need to take that. We need to market that. Yeah, come up with some artist rendering. Oh, that'd be fun to watch. Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed our college football rivalry and trophy game show this week. So for Jon Nelson, Phil Canner, and Anthony Goldman, the whole gang was together in this one. I'm John Wilkerson. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the games, everyone.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football. You can find this and past shows by downloading the OSG Sports app on your mobile device. Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.